Welcome everyone. My name is Shadi Ghaheri, and I had the pleasure to collaborate with all of our guests today. Last spring 2019, on the show Lockdown, that Rattlestick Theater had a world premiere of it, written by Cori Thomas, who we have as a guest today with us as well. I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping, just saying how the conversation today will work before we actually start. We are going to have a conversation for 30-35 minutes with our guests, and after that we will like to have a more dialogue with our audience. So from the moment that we begin, even now, you can feel free to, in the chat down on the Zoom, you see chat, send me any questions that you have, and we will try to answer any question that comes our way. And at the end, we will finish with the poems from Robbie. So I would like to introduce first and most our lovely guest, Eric Maserati. He is going to play music for us, and after that we'll jump into the conversation. And FYI, this conversation is being recorded, so if you do not want to be part of the recording, you can just go off or stop your video. Thank you so much. Eric, yours.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Hi, Eric. Yes.
Okay, good. So this is a song called Break the Mold. Hope you guys like it. Yeah. No lie. Yeah. Please feel me. Yeah. So far from perfect. Yeah. Break the mold, yeah. I know I am so far from perfect, but I know I can speak for more than one person when I say I am so tired of hurting. We could change the world forever if we come together. We can break the mold, oh. Yeah, we can break the mold, no lie. Yeah, we can break the mold. We can break the mold. We can change the world forever if we come together. We can break the mold. Mentally constipated, on my mind but can't come out. Surrounded by cats and real, some fake. Observing, wait and make them out. Who's who? Really ain't got a clue, man. Think it do cool, man. Kicking it like Luke Kane till you see a few things. You see on two lanes like J. Cole the 2 Chainz. Now it's time to change. You part of your crew, man. Don't do the big group thing. That's the method, man. No Wu-Tang dudes too loose like shoes with no shoestrings. I try to lace them, but they burn like butane when you introduce planes to the equation. Try not to give up on my people and be patient. But the reality of the situation, large part of the population can't save them. Hopefully they see the truth. The reason that I care so much, cause I've been through so much trying to spare the young. For the things I've done and thinking dumb. And the scene of guns and drugs in the slums. To where you from, to where I'm from. It's all the same thing, just in different ways. It's all the same pain, just a different place. Same conclusion, just a different pace. So I'm trying to break the mold. I'm trying to take control of the mind of the masses. I won't stop till the deaf can hear me loud and clearly. Blind see it happen. And that's deeper than rapping. I speak out of passion, no line, please feel me. We all victims of that Willie Lynch letter, but if we come together, so much better we will be. I know I am so far from perfect, but I know I can speak for more than one person when I say I am so tired of hurting. We can change the world forever if we come together. We can break the mold. Yeah, we can break the mold. No lie. Yeah, we can break the mold. We can break the mold. We can change the world forever if we come together. We can break the mold. Product of my environment. At least that's what we're told. You don't plan for retirement when you program to blow grams and sell dope. To the day that you're gone, bro, I swear so cold. When you gotta call home, a place where you grow, thinking hope was a joke. And everybody broke, thinking that's how it go for somebody like me. Just another young brother from the streets. Where you gotta see the beauty in the beast, cause the weak can't eat, but we can't leave. But how can we stay free. When they lock us in prison, when we've been in prison to blacks, with no equal opportunity, go for jobs and protection will come from a Glock. When will it stop? Some will say never, but you never know till you make that endeavor. No lie, ties to the lies must be so odd. Try to get a world of perception so fly that you fly away to a higher place. When you was told you couldn't reach it, open your eyes today. If you're alive today, we can break the mold into pieces all around the globe. We can break the mold. It's in our control. You gotta let go. What's frivolous? Whoa, do better to show the youth something better instead of robbing them of their innocence. And that's deeper than rapping. I speak out of passion. The line, please spare me. We all victims of that Willie Lynch letter, but if we come together, so much better we will be. I know I am so far from perfect, but I know I can speak for more than one person when I say I am so tired of hurting. We could change the world forever if we come together. We can break the mold. Yeah, we can break the mold. No lie. Yeah, we can break the mold. We can break the mold. We can change the world forever if we come together. We can break the mold. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you so much. Eric, as you have seen, is a talented musician and a filmmaker, and we had the privilege of collaborating with him as a musician on lockdown last year as well. Okay, I'm gonna unmute our lovely guest. This technology, look. Okay, hello everyone. Just a little bit about our guests, and just believe me, it's not enough to tell how wonderful they each one individually are and how like amazing things they are doing. But I will very much encourage you to go and check out their work, and there's all the links available to you in the chat that my colleagues will share with you. We have today Eric Maserati, Charles Moore from RTA. Charles Moore is Director of Operations at RTA, and RTA stands for Rehabilitation through the Arts, and their mission is to use the transformative power of the arts to develop social and cognitive skills that prisoners need for successful reintegration into the community. Please check their work out. They are an amazing organization. Next, we have Robert Pollock. Robert Pollock is a program manager at PEN America's Prison Writing. PEN America Prison and Justice Writing Program stands at the intersection of literature and human rights to protect free expression in the United States and world. Please, again, check their work. They have amazing they have a book, and they have a lot of like collectives of poems and paintings and a lot of things that they have gathered. I will leave to Robert to talk about it a little bit more. And last but not least, we have Cori Thomas with us today. Cori is a playwright and an actress, and she wrote Lockdown, and we had the privilege of working with her last year around that piece. So welcome, everyone. I will invite you all to individually talk a little bit about your work and anything regarding organization you work with.
So I'll go first, if that's okay. As Shady just said, my name is Charles Moore, and I am currently the Director of Operations for Rehabilitation Through the Arts. I am the first alumni to be hired by the organization. I was incarcerated for 17 years, where I discovered Rehabilitation Through the Arts in 2004. And as they say, after that, the rest is history. I think the best part of what I do is go back into the facilities to work with the men and women to show them that there is life after incarceration. And it's just been the highlight of my incarceration, actually, to be able to go back into the facilities. And I thank you for having me. Nice job, Eric, with the song. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Eric killed it. I'm gonna let Cori go first before me. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Cori Thomas. I wrote the play Lockdown, which premiered at Rattlestick last year. It was inspired by, and I was helped by, a lot of men that I've come to grow and care a great deal about at San Quentin State Prison. Eric is one of the amazing people that I met there. So the play, you know, carries their DNA, and I was really privileged to be able to take the archive copy. We got special permission to screen it there just for the men who had helped me on the play, and that was like one of the most amazing experiences of my life. But in addition to that, I've volunteered there for almost 4 years now with an organization called No More Tears, which is an anti-violence program that was begun by a man named Lonnie Morris, who has been incarcerated there. He's going on his 44th year. Eric knows him well. So, you know, when this is not happening, we go into the prison on weekends, and there's a 3-hour workshop with men there. The program's been happening for over 17 years now. I'm now a member of the board, and we're starting to do work with people who are also leaving prison. So there's a big re-entry component to the work that we're doing inside. I guess just a tiny little bit. At the moment, I'm in the process of writing the memoirs of a woman who was sex trafficked and incarcerated for 20 years. And so that's what I've actually been working on at the moment. So it's a very different sort of style of work than I usually do. And that's been very challenging and interesting and inspiring as well.
Thank you, Cori.
I'm Robert Pollock. I'm the program manager at Penn. Basically, I run a long-running prison writing program where writers on the inside submit their work to our contest in poetry, nonfiction, and drama. And then we stage the works, the winning works, and open it up to the world so that they can enjoy the amazing writing from behind the walls. We also pair writers with writing mentors on the outside, and they exchange letters back and forth, honing their craft. The program has been going for 30 years, and I've been running it for the last 2. I've been out of prison for the last 4 years almost. And while I was inside, I was also an alumni of Rehabilitation Through the Arts and various other arts programs that like Carnegie Hall's Musical Connections program, Music Cambia's music program at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. And I'm also a graduate of Hudson Link for Higher Education in Prison, which offers education inside prisons. I think the most important thing about this whole meeting for me here today is like really presencing what is happening on the inside from what we've heard and seen, and from first person narrative and art. And I'm glad all of you are here today.
So much. Thank you so much, Robert. We wanted to start with a very core question that has been on our mind, and maybe the reason that today we gathered here to speak more is that how we know the circumstances of today and the COVID-19 problem that we are all facing has affected all of us, but how has this affected your work and you yourself and your community around you? I will leave it to all 4 of you to have this conversation.
I'll kick it off. I'll definitely kick it off. So I would definitely say it has tremendously impacted me. So one of the things that I was doing full time, me and a very, very good friend of mine, the co-creator and sound designer at Ear Hustle, Antoine Banks Williams, we were currently on tour going to high schools and colleges, utilizing the power and the influence of music as well as the power of the narrative. And we tell our stories as formerly incarcerated individuals as an attempt to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. So based on with this COVID stuff that's going on, not only are the schools shut down and discontinuing that, but also that was our way of living. So now it's a huge impact on having to adapt and maintain a sense of stability now without a steady sense of income, which was my all, you know what I mean? So definitely I can say that it has impacted me tremendously, for sure.
Wow, Eric, sorry to hear that. I can echo Eric's sentiments. My whole livelihood, in a sense, is working inside of correctional facilities, and currently Rehabilitation Through the Arts, and not all non-essential people are locked out of Department of Corrections. And we are fortunate enough to be able to, we did get approval from the depths of program to send in material to our participants so that they will have some form of art to continue it in there, because my prayers go out to each and every one of them. I was locked up for 9/11 when that happened, and that was a big fear for everyone who was incarcerated as well as the world. And I think that this COVID-19 is a little bit more serious than that, because the death rate of COVID-19 is a lot worse than what 9/11 was. You know, all life is precious, however, but, you know, my thoughts and prayers go out to my brothers and sisters incarcerated worldwide through this, because it's tough enough to be out here in society living with this COVID-19 crisis, but to be inside and not have answers and not able to really practice social distancing and not having the proper mask, it's just got to be terrifying. So let's, if you will, keep those brothers and sisters in prayers as well as your family members.
Yeah, the work that I do, which is writing, I can do almost any time. Of course, that doesn't mean there's an outlet. Theater requires a live audience component. So that's sort of on a standstill. Lockdown, for instance, is supposed to be done next spring in Milwaukee, but we've already gotten word that it may not be done after all, because things are backed up and were canceled and whatever. So I have so many friends in the theater world who were impacted by COVID-19, who had plays that were just opening or about to open or in rehearsal, and they were canceled. But my heart is at the moment breaking for all of the incarcerated people that I know, especially at San Quentin prison, where I've been working for 4 years now. You know, when you go in and spend that kind of time that I've spent in there, the people there become like family. I mean, everyone there is like my family. So to have no communication, they're locked down, and I know the circumstances. I've gone on tours, I've seen the cells, I know how close and unsanitary and unhygienic the scenario is. So it's terrifying. I mean, the man that I work with is 69 years old, and so he's also in that really vulnerable age range. So I worry a lot about him and others like him who are there. So it's just been a really harrowing and stressful time, because you want to help, but you don't know how to help. There's some rules in place that say that volunteers are not allowed to directly help. So things just become so tricky and sticky and complicated. But I'm just keeping a good hope out and just praying and hoping that things somehow will come together in a good way. But it's a really, really worrisome time right now.
Thank you, Cori. I too share that same concern for the people I work with across the country. There are writers who I've been writing for years now, and luckily Penn runs the kind of program where we're not on the ground inside the facilities. We operate through the mail, which unfortunately didn't receive funding in the stimulus package, which we're advocating for as an organization. Apparently mail isn't important, but it's our main lifeline to people who write inside. And I've heard through letters and phone calls horrifying approaches taken by administration to attempting to keep people safe in an impossible situation. We have a writer whose work I'll share at the end of this performance event in Attica Correctional Facility, who described that when people's family called the facility to check in on their well-being, the administration's response was to lock that person up in a quarantine cell, whether or not they showed symptoms, and they may or may not receive testing. So essentially punishing people for family checking in on them. He described them using hairnets as masks in the chow hall. Not quite effective PPE. And then worst of all, recently over the weekend, We published his graphic depiction of this on our newsletter, which you can check out at penn.org. He said the superintendent stopped by his cell and let him know he wasn't his favorite person. He's been shaken down 4 times for just saying what's going on the inside. And this is not a one-off type situation. We see this with all of our writers. I can't stress enough how brave you have to be to tell the truth while in prison. Like, anyone who sticks their neck out, says the truth, will be punished for it or at risk of being punished for it. And the conditions that I'm hearing, entire floors are being turned into quarantine units in open air that are connected to other units. So there's literally no distance between everyone who's sick, germs, and the everyone else. There's, even when there are closed protective units, it's very limited. So one medical facility may have 5 of these closed air holding cells, and that's not enough for as many people are contracting COVID. And beyond that, there was a big push, just staying aware of what administrations across the country, which each have different rules. We've shifted heavily into advocacy and supporting the work of local advocates who are, all of these are in our newsletter, so I won't go into detail, but the conditions are grim. And I think everybody outside recognizes that on the inside, my work has to be less about uplifting great poetry and much more about getting resources to and attention on an issue that really is about life or death for the people on the inside.
Robert, has there been like any extra medical care after this for the place that you're talking about, or no changes?
No, from the accounts that I've got, and numerous of the people on the call right now know many of the people at Sing Sing Correctional Facility, which, due to its proximity to the epicenter here in New York City, is blossoming with cases. We know firsthand several people who are either have contracted the virus or definitely at risk of contracting the virus. And many people say it's a matter of time. The medical response, even if they wanted it to be adequate, it can't possibly be adequate. Later on, I'll invite someone to speak who's actually experienced quarantine at a correctional facility and knows what that looks like. But to my knowledge, no, the responses are not adequate. I did hear from a writer in a California prison who described himself as being the first patient who came down with COVID, and he was surprised that he had access to a test right away, that they put him in a quarantine cell right away. But subsequently to him catching it, 30, 40 other people were also following him. And the good news there is that he said it seems to be on the wane, that he has recovered and that he's doing well. But and there, the medical care, big ups to California. I don't know what they're doing differently out there, but it seemed to be adequate there. It's a different story everywhere across the country.
Yeah, I think each prison is so individual. I mean, there's so many rules at each places. And for instance, San Quentin, which we know, I think is the oldest prison. I don't know if it's in the country or definitely in California. The cells are 6 by 8, tiny, and 2 men are in each cell, or there's H unit, which is, Eric, you were in H unit, right? But
yes.
Can you just describe so people can kind of get a picture of what H unit is?
So as she described, you have North Block and West Block, which is where the cells is, and then you have H unit, which are 200-man dorms. It's 100 bunks with 200 people. That's the max capacity, and it is actually beyond capacity at times, to the point where they have to send people to North Block and West Block to the cells because it's overcrowded. To effectively do social distancing is literally impossible down there. Like, literally the proximity is so close within the bunks, within the bathrooms, within the showers. Like, everything is so close. It's literally impossible to do social distancing there. Like, it just won't work.
Yeah, the tiers, I think, are 3 feet wide.
Right.
On, you know, in the cell blocks. The showers are a little room with 13 shower heads. Is it 13? And so men are crowded in that tiny little space, you know, unopened. It's not like stalls. It's one room with shower heads. And so all these men are crowded in there, you know, so everyone's touching each other and near each other. You know, it's just, I mean, there's the safety and the hygiene of a prison situation is impossible to maintain, not to mention then things like wipes, hand sanitizer, those things are not at all allowed either. So sometimes people don't have adequate soap. A lot of people that I did get to speak with were saying, we're not even going to the showers. We're just taking little bird baths in our cells because people are scared to go out of their cells. But it's just, you know, it's a human rights emergency. I feel prisons in America at the moment and what's happening, and people, if it really gets rampantly into that system, I mean, it's just going to be a devastating outcome. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know that there's anything that can actually be done at this point, but and then what can be done prison to prison is going to be will differ according to the rules of the prison. So there's nothing that we can send in, for instance. You can't send anything to somebody in prison. You can send a letter, you could send a paperback book. I think that's about it. So it's really, you know, our hands are very much tied, I think, right now.
I want to invite my good friend and mentor, actor, musician, arts and higher education staff member at Hudson Link, Kenyatta Hughes, to speak if he has any firsthand information from the inside, because I know he's very much in touch with many people who are going through this, especially in New York State. Mm-hmm. Hi, Kenyatta.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Kenyatta.
Hey, Charles. Greetings, one and all. Kate, Ricky, so good to see you guys. I really appreciate you guys hosting this, by the way. I think this is really helpful right now, especially for a lot of us who have, it's important for, to remember, obviously, that it could certainly be worse. And there are individuals who are on the other side of this relationship, who are inside of there, who are still enduring everything that they've been enduring before, plus this, without the relationships or the fullness of relationship that comes from us being able to go in and interact with them. But also I can speak to just so many of my friends and, you know, brothers and sisters who were there and have come out and have made it a point to continue to reach back and to maintain those relationships. And folks are really, really suffering and really pained by knowing that they can't do anything. Robbie, today, Cecily and my wife and I learned that Joe Wilson has this very strong symptoms that imply that it's pretty clear that he's infected, unfortunately. But obviously he hasn't been tested, and that's one of the things that that guys are wrestling with, is this not knowing. There's this horrible thing of this lack of information. There's a philosopher said that humans can endure anyhow, as long as they know a why. And I think, as Robbie was saying, while I was incarcerated for 24 and a half years, and on 2 different occasions, I was quarantined, both times, because there was some sort of, it was measles, I believe, in one instance, and chickenpox in another. And I never had either of those afflictions. And rather than them attempting to segregate the people who, because by the time it's a bureaucracy, right? And they're not motivated necessarily by the welfare of the people who were there. So by the time they really got on top of it, it was because it was a significant outcry and it was a significant problem. It was too late to try and sequester or contain the spread itself. So instead, they tried to make it a point to take the relatively few of us who had not contracted it and to separate us. So the first time that happened to me, they simply told me I had to stay in my cell 23 hours, and then 1 hour a day I was allowed to go to outside for rec with the other, I don't know, about a dozen men who had also been sequestered. By cell, it's a cage. It's literally, there are bars. I mean, they barely keep. They're not keeping any sort of pathogen, any sort of transmittable. My food was delivered to me by mess hall workers who were consistently interacting with the population. The officers who came back and interacted with me are consistently interacting with the population. To be clear, the second time that it happened, however, I literally was taken to a wing of the hospital and placed in a room with like double doors. Food was brought into a space in between the doors by individuals who were wearing protective gear and protective equipment, and they would set it down. They would close the first door. That was handled. But then again, one instance was in a facility that was further up north, and the last instance was in Sing Sing, which at that time was receiving a fair amount of scrutiny. And that is the other thing that I would like for, I mean, Robbie and Charles obviously can speak to it. When individuals know they're being watched, it makes them behave differently. And it's the reason why the individuals, the men that Robbie was speaking of, why they're enduring the things they're enduring, because when they made it a point to speak to people, and those people said, hey, what's going on in there? It makes folks uncomfortable. And it's unfortunate because, I mean, I can say personally, I have a relationship with the superintendent of Sing Sing. And he, during the course of my incarceration, there were many things he did that benefited me greatly, benefited my family greatly. And I can appreciate that. I can also say at the same time, that he's a part of a system, and the entire system that is not designed for the benefit of the individuals who are involved there. So it has certainly been frustrated. As you say, we just keep them in prayer. I don't know all the ways that we can that we can necessarily help them, the ways that we can necessarily interact with them at this point. The tablet situation is iffy. The programs like the ones that Robbie and I have taken part with Carnegie, it's these things are almost falling apart. RTA is diligent and very creative in trying to figure out ways to consistently and continually maintain that artistic relationship. And I appreciate that, Charles. That's important.
I want to shout out to that there's several RTA members on the call, and I'm so glad. These are the volunteers who went inside prisons for years over the decades, teaching us acting and comedy, which certainly helps coping in these times. So thank you to all of you.
I think one of the most important things also that we can consider, I think Kenyatta touched on it just a hint, and it was first exposed when I was on a Zoom call with Kenyatta about 10 days ago, is that what's happening to our poor brothers and sisters who are coming home after serving double digits of time incarcerated to this COVID-19 society. So it's so unfortunate because there's no way that we know when they're leaving because we have no contact with them. And then they're just out here in society trying to cope. Some are going to shelters, which is, of course, not good. And God bless those who are going to their family members. But that's also an issue we should be concerned with, is because people are being released because you can't hold people past their time. And they're also trying to release the aging population and those who qualify. a little bit earlier too, to try to release this population of New York State as best they can. So the docs has a lot on their hands at this time with this COVID-19.
And I want to remind everyone, whoever have a question, you can send it to me or any other co-host, and we can share that. Do we, friends, feel moving on to questions from our audience? Any last thoughts? Yeah, okay, great. So we have one here. Hi, and thank you for this. I have a friend that is in Parole Division for Legal Aid Society, working to get people out on a case-by-case basis, and is also seeking to see if there is a widespread effort for parolees in particular to have the governor and the attorney general work to release as many of them as possible, or if there are volunteers out there in prison reform or abolishment and that would work on a petition or other such advocacy effort. Any idea or lead, welcome, and thanks again.
So there's a lot there. I think that there is a lot of advocacy work being done on behalf of the incarcerated. I've been watching Governor Cuomo's news conferences every day, and I think I heard him mention corrections only like one time, unfortunately. But the department did put out a report, and in that report, I heard that some nonviolents are being released early, and that the governor is going to move forward with releasing the aging population on an eligibility basis of some people 55 and older. So some relief is coming, not enough, but I think some relief is coming. Anyone else want to weigh in?
I don't think it's enough relief that's coming, but I mean, anything is welcomed, of course. I think that, part of the issue is this term violent and nonviolent, because it's so, not clear and not accurate most of the time. And so you have, aging people who might have a quote unquote violent offense, or somebody who's had no violent infraction, maybe in 30, 40 years, and have been incarcerated for many, many years. And because of that little word violent, they're now not eligible to be released. So, I mean, I think that, the reform has to just go into so many different areas. It's so complicated and so tangled and varied, but whatever relief is happening is good. I have heard about people being released and some aging people, but this violent and nonviolent thing is a really tricky hurdle that people have to try to unravel. And I think a new definition needs to be voiced for what that is, because it's not ever clear,
I'll add as well that the Catal Center is one of the hubs working very strongly for release. They're also working on bail reform, parole reform for people who are on parole outside, for whom a technical violation could become a sentence of death. And you can check them out at catalcenter.org. We'll probably send around the links. But there are lots of organizations doing this, and I think the point of bringing people together, both from prosecution and attorneys and lawyers, combining with grassroots advocacy, I think that question shows a really awesome approach of bringing everybody together in order to make a change. And I've been signing lots of petitions lately and circulating lots more. So if it doesn't exist, let's get it together, is my perspective.
And we would love to have those from you, Robert, if you have them now or later, we can share with our audience. Thank you. Yes, Eric.
Definitely, I like to piggyback on that as well. I think Robert as well as Cori and Charles touched up on some extremely valid points. I think to increase progression, again, like Cori was saying, some relief is better than none, but I do feel like it's a lot more that can be done. And I think one of the main reasons of this hesitance, if we will, because it boils down to a matter of perception of value, if you will. Again, people treat you the way they see you. So like, kind of like what Cori was saying, when you get to labeling people as violent felonies and things of that nature, it increases reluctance to actually do something about it. And when it's a collective agreement, I guess you could say, of the perception of value of a person, then you can get away with a lot more as far as like dehumanizing them, as far as oppressing them and things of that nature. And I think that kind of touched up on the point that you were making earlier, Robert, about like the consequences of being truthful about our conditions being incarcerated. You know what I mean? Because again, there's so many different tactics that come into play to dehumanize a person, ultimately to get away with whatever their objective is, right? Whether that's economics or whatever it may be. But I think once we begin to do certain things to get the masses, again, to see the formerly and currently incarcerated as people, not necessarily as our mistakes and things of that nature, I think we'll begin to see a lot more done in our justice system, a lot more done within the conditioning of incarceration in totality.
Word.
Yeah, the punitive, so I was just going to say also just the punitive philosophy of incarceration as it exists right now is to me the biggest problem, because it's seen as a place to punish somebody who's done something wrong. It's not seen as a place to rehabilitate a person at all. It's seen as you did something wrong, now you've got to go be punished. And not only do you have to be punished, the label has to stick with you for the rest of your life, that you're defined by whatever it is you did. And so there's no room in that equation really for somebody to be able to change and to be able to move past that. And so that's, to me, the biggest problem. I mean, when you have societies in other countries that don't have this punitive thing attached to prison, and it's seen as a place to either get well or be healed or receive treatment or, you know, figure out what you did and get better, you don't have the amount of crime either that takes place, you know, in this country where you've got, you know, 2.3 people incarcerated. 2.3 million people, sorry. So it's just a really, really, I mean, it's a really horrible scenario. I've seen people writing posts and the people saying, well, they did something wrong, who cares about them? They should, if they get sick, too bad. I mean, just nasty, horrible, inhumane thoughts that are applying to human beings. And so, you know, that's the kind of thing that just gets me crazy. So
we have a lovely person saying, when I saw lockdown, I was deeply moved by the centering of voice of formerly incarcerated people in a space that is usually occupied by a predominantly white theater-going audience. The talkback after the performance and this event are so important to center voices of formerly incarcerated people. How can we, all of us here, advocate for this communication to happen on a larger and louder scale?
That's a funny question.
Yeah, I think that, and I don't know Eric, but I can see that he probably gets around a lot. I think that the invitation has to be given to us. I know Robbie does a lot of speaking. I'm Kenyatta's new agent, so I'm going to get him in doing some speaking engagements. So I think the invitation has to be given to us, and we will be there because we pride ourselves because we represent those who are still locked up. So the more we can get our voice out to show the change that we have made since the day that we went in, the achievements that we made while we were incarcerated, is just speaking for those who are also inside. And to echo a little bit on Cori's point, I think that the perception of those formerly incarcerated is getting a little better, not much, but a little better, because we are getting out there and we are advocating for ourselves. We are writing papers. We have a great person who's a friend of all of ours, Lawrence Bartley, who is doing some extremely excellent writing for the Marshall Project. So I think that we are being represented in a form that we have never been represented in a long time. So we have to keep up the good work.
I would love to add on to that too. PEN America and myself, along with many other people who are formerly incarcerated, were invited specifically early on in the process of lockdown, which I found remarkable. It's made me a Rattlestick fan for life, sort of.
I am too.
I recall sitting in a room around other social justice and criminal justice reform workers, many of whom I knew from different contexts, and we were in the theater space of Rattlestick, and it felt sacred, hallowed, and real. And everything I'd learned about community was being enacted in that space. And I think, I mean, I met Cori there, and I feel like Cori's a friend. And we also made connections with other organizations doing work. I think a lot of powerful relationships happened all throughout that process. And I think it's a model for theater that I like to see replicated everywhere else. I can't say enough about that. And even though it's kind of like kissing butt a little bit, I don't care. It's something that we want to copy in our work. And it goes two ways. So the theater bends toward us, but in a way, Black and brown communities have their own channels of culture. And, you know, I didn't necessarily want to go see Broadway ever, really. Maybe once or twice before I was introduced to, you know, really awesome, cool stuff by people who cared to share, not from a conquistador ivory tower helping the poor, you know, poor child from the hood, but in a way that, hey, this is the art we have, and what's the art you have, and how does that connect and relate to each other? Everybody digs Shakespeare. I mean, come on. So yeah, I think that's a really important question, and I think it's happening. There's a gentleman, there's people, too few formerly incarcerated actors who are getting past that real significant barrier against, you know, people who want to hire or go see someone perform who has real life experience, who's lived it. And I do think we need to see more of it. I'd like to play a role, you know. I'd play a guy with an afro.
I would definitely cast you. We can talk later.
Thank you.
I have shared a link for everyone where you can find all of the names and organizations that we have collaborated last year on lockdown. And it is just a really good resources to see who's doing what. Each one of these organizations really truly are doing specific works because the work is very big, and you might find where you can help more. I see a lot of people asking how they can help right now, and I really appreciate like your questions. We are gonna move on with our poems, but I am going to keep trying to share some articles or links here that you can maybe find more resources. There's another link right now that I shared that is just a list of really good readings that we collected from people like Robbie, Charles, and many other collaborators who joined us last year. Please let us know if anything else we can help. And I'm going to hand it over to Robbie to finish this beautiful conversation with some art and poetry.
Cool. This is by my friend Jeremy Wilson, who's in Attica Correctional Facility, who got the visit from the superintendent for sending us his graphic work, which is on a link that Shadi just sent. This poem he sent like 30 poems in a week. And he was so grateful to know that it was going to be shared with people on the outside. This is an honor for me to read it. This is called COVID-ed. He uses the alias Punk Rock Spock, like Star Trek. All right. The gathering storms, bunched like a clot of cumulus, a full breath of the nettled spheres, nebulous, mercurial, hungry, patient. A flash of casual contact, incarnated as a colony of tentacled balloons gathered in a veil of organic gauze, now terminally drifting toward the cilia and lymph. A leap, a sense of the world dropping away, the stench hidden, the sweet taste of victory missing, rising balloon flesh, a soft pop, a slight release of pressure. Then a terrifying realization that the winds have simply shifted. Human, though, to think this floating bouquet of entropy being ended so simply or so soon. That's Jeremy Wilson. I got one more if you guys want to hear it. Give me a sign and like, oh, thank you for not dying and sending us your poetry. This is from Justin Rovios Monson. I really appreciate you letting me read these and presence the work. Justin Rovios Monson is one of Penn's Writing for Justice Fellows. We award fellowships to formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated, and people working in social justice to write about issues connected to mass incarceration and designed to spark dialogue. So this is, I'll read one poem by him, but you can check these all out at penn.org/works of justice. This is American Quarantine Narrative. I do not understand what this sentence means, I told my captors a decade ago. My words played on a loop over and over through the door as I sat in my box. I received no answer as the world arrived in a state of sickness. I received no answer as the world clawed at the walls of an adjacent box. Some nights I found comfort in the echoes burrowing through concrete. A box, 8 feet by 10 feet, can do more than hold your body. I do not understand what this sentence means. I do not understand. The loop began to alter itself. There were simple distortions. I do not, stretch ad infinitum. There were cuts and chaos. Sentence, sent. I do not, low creeping bass. Sleep no longer an option. I began to dig through the walls between the world and I. I never believed my captors would reward my obedience, a string of acts rigged with explosives. In a vision, I became very sick. My captors would be forced to feed me medicine, hook my lungs to a machine. Alas, I remained of decent health, though without enough water. A ruthless drip of days. I do not. And in my thirst, not this sentence, not. What this means, madness soon followed. My digging spoon dulled to a useless instrument. My fingers bled. On the 40th day, as the sun began its work, I broke through. I removed my eye, pressed it through the opening with my outstretched hand. In the adjacent box, I could see a television attached to a speaker, voices coming forth. What this means, sentence, what this means, I do not understand. On the television, ghosted streets and overflowing hospitals, the loop, a chorus. I do not understand what this sentence means, I do not understand. I contorted my wrist, eye searching each corner of the adjacent box. The world was not there. My captors were not there.
Thank you so much, Robbie. Thank you. I want to say a person thank you for reading the poem. So we don't know the name, but someone thanked you for reading the first poem. Great, lovely. We have been so honored to have all of you here. We have 5 more minutes if our guests want to share anything else, or if there's anyone who has a burning question or thoughts that they want to share, please let me know here. Cori?
Yeah, so if I could, I'd just take a moment. First of all, again, thank you. This is necessary. This is necessary and needed. I'm working with a organization called Rehabilitation through the Arts, and just literally while we were on this call, they just sent out to each of the staff, a call for submissions and asked us to speak to our networks. Specifically, they want to create an archive. I put it in the chat, and I think Kaz will be spreading that out to you guys so that you can see it. It's just reaching out to educators and teaching artists who have been, and the communities that have been impacted by that. So that means, as it's stated here, the students, alumni, their families, faculty, program coordinators, prison staff, members, anyone else impacted by those intersecting between art education in general, higher education, and prison and COVID, and to just create a sort of archive of these experiences. So the submissions can be letters, photos, poems, journal entries, emails, lesson plans, artwork, and of different. It's very wide. It's just that one of the things that we've been talking about is this is a remarkable time. This is a remarkable happening. And often as we are in the midst of things that are extraordinary, we are so caught up with the ordinary, the mundanity of life. And that's just, I'm talking about as simple as brushing your teeth and taking a shower, to really appreciate the magnitude of what is happening in this moment right now. And to attempt to look back on this with perspective 5-10 years from now, in this moment, as we speak to our children and our grandchildren. And I don't just mean our genetic descendants, but those who come after us. I'm reminded of scriptures in the Old Testament when it talks about Passover and different things that Moses and them were called to do. And he said, do these things, which are weird things, like wear this on your forehead or whatever, strange. And they're like, this is strange. Why would we do this? And he said, so that when someone asks you, when your children ask you, why are you doing that? You can tell them, we did this because when we were here, this happened. And so it's important for that while we are still here in the midst of this, we remember that we have to preserve this memory, this moment, and speak to it. We are the historians of this time. That is who artists are. We are our current historians. And so we have to compose this history now, capture it, and prepare it for the future.
I think that's why I want to thank Rattlestick for having us, and thank you all for coming and being here with us. Thank you all.
I am so grateful that Robbie told me about this. Thank you all.
Thank you.
This was great.
I would love to unmute everyone so we can just clap one.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for joining
goodness.
us. Just will let you know that next week on Tuesday, Rattlestick will have another conversation such as this around domestic violence and COVID-19. So please join us, and you know how to join us. If not, we will share like the address here. I want to thank you, Cori, Robbie, Charles, Eric, and Kenyatta, for all of the treasures that you shared with us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Eric, it was a pleasure meeting you, Eric.
It was.
Eric, you killed. We gotta link up.
You are
Yeah,
dope.
no, we're gonna work.
We're
working.
fire.
We're working on something.
Up here in New York.
He's coming to New York.
That was fire.
He's coming to New York.
Out to share a lot of music on YouTube, and we're waiting for the information so we can follow you.
Yes.
Yes.
I will be
Great job.
today with a bunch of music. I'll be dropping my first song on there tonight. For
Woo,
sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, goodbye everyone. Have a wonderful day.
All right.
Everybody stay safe.